We are back for another podcast. This is Sloan Wilson with Rex Lee and Grayson Collins of Results Media. And today we are going to tackle Simon Sinek's Start With Why. So for those of you who don't know Simon Sinek, he is a British-American author, motivational speaker. I believe the last time I checked, the Start With Why TED Talk was the third most viewed TED Talk.
Yeah, I thought it was first.
First? It's first? Really? Okay.
Number one
then. Organizational consultant, thought leader. I gravitate to him very much so, and I think those, by evidence of his success on that TED Talk and his books. By the way, he's an author of 5 different books, and we'll dive into the Start With Why. You guys want to kick off of sort of the organizational structure or what that means, what that why means?
Absolutely. For me, this was one of the most motivational books that I've had the pleasure of reading. And so I'll start off with, right at the beginning, he really gets into the difference between using manipulation and not using manipulation. And this is really core to my heart because I was taught how to be an amazing manipulator.
Yeah.
And if you really get into sales and in much of sales leadership, they're taught for the last 100 years to absolutely manipulate. And so he starts off really forward with talking about a whole bunch of American car engineers, and they go over to Japan to compare, right? And they're going to compare, and it's 2 different management styles, the Japanese management team and the American management team. American goes over and they're checking out the Japanese, and they realize something instantly right away, and that they don't have to hammer the door hinges to make the door align. So they're just like, what the heck? How do you do that? Because, they're back in their factories. They have to use the hammer to get it all right, you know? And so they're thinking, that these Japanese aren't even doing quality control and they're not hammering the door in just right. So they go to the engineers and, how are you guys doing this? What are you doing? Why are you skipping this process? Oh, well, we engineer the door up front to fit just right.
Right.
We already did, up front, we designed it to do it that way. And they're looking at them and it's like, wow, what a concept. And what Simon Sinek is using this story to do is to show you the difference between manipulation and just doing it right from the beginning.
Sure.
You don't have to manipulate to get what you want. You can actually do it the right way from the beginning. And what he's really setting us up for is the people that do it for the why instead of do it for the paycheck. Do it for the right reasons, and they're not going to necessarily lean on the easy way to manipulate, and they're going to build the door accurately with the hinges that fit right on, and the door fits, and they don't have to use the actual hammer to make it fit.
Yeah, I mean, I think his whole main point of this, the main concept, is that in business or anything you do, you need to start with why before what. And I know that we'll probably get into a little bit on maybe altering that a little bit. But that's kind of the gist of what he's talking about. If your why is not in the right place, then everything else starts to fall apart with that.
And I cannot agree with this anymore. From the heart and soul, whether it's your business, whether it's you as a person, an individual,
family,
if your family, your marriage, if you start a marriage for the right reasons and it's why, it's going to be successful. If it's an incredible, so you can apply it in all aspects of your life for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah, but I think the interesting thing is, and I totally agree with what you said, but the realization is that very few people and very few companies express that why, right? They do it in the reverse order.
Sure.
And he uses Apple as a very compelling way that they do it in the reverse order, that they at the heart are a computer company that really at the end of the day, they don't have anything that's greatly,
different than Dell.
Different than Dell. They have the, access to the same resources, same media, the same engineers, but the thought of buying, a cell phone from Dell or a PC tablet
It's repulsive.
Right. And it's that they miss that why, in which Apple does so keenly and has this fervent, passionate followers.
Right.
Which I think is really interesting. And you kind of, take that to a different step is, what's your purpose? What's your cause? What is your belief? Why does your company exist? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? Why should we care? And I think so many times, I think in the past, let's say 100 years since the advent of sort of the last 100 years of being marketed to, that has worked, right? Because we've had the sort of finite delivery system of a television or a radio, and they'll just hammer that. And now things are just so much more sophisticated, and buyers are so much more sophisticated at such a young age. I think he points out that 100 years ago, the average, I think it was 12-year-old had 6 articles of clothing or something like that. They just we didn't have. Now it's we've got stuff, lots of stuff,
lots of stuff,
and lots of ways to be marketed to. So I think that for me, the start with why just totally flipped the script,
right?
Totally, and I think that's a great thing about Simon Sinek. He takes something and drills it down to where it just sounds so obvious, but it's right in front of us all, right? And he sees things really clearly, and I really enjoy the way he presents us.
And it's so crazy how, as we do more and more of these podcasts, everything just goes together, right? It's like the ideas from Seth Godin go along with Simon Sinek and Gary Vee and all these people, and everything they're talking about, like the real thought leaders and all this stuff, they're talking about the same things. And I like one of Simon Sinek's quotes is, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And I feel like that goes back to that authentic story. When you start with your why and your authentic reason for what you're doing and what you want to accomplish and who you want to help, who you want to serve, like that naturally, that authentic story attracts the people that you're trying to reach anyway.
In chapter 2, he really brought it home for me to understand, and I'm hoping maybe my little quick story can help people relate exactly what he's talking about and why. And he talks about the salespeople, and in general, and in this I've been through so many times. In sales, generally what we do is we create a carrot, and we put a carrot right out in front of them so they'll chase it, and it's called a commission, and it's big commission, and we get salespeople to chase it,
right?
And he goes into this, and it releases dopamine, and it gets you very excited when you get a big commission check. I've followed this path most of my life and chased that carrot, and it's so real, and it motivates people.
Yeah, I like big checks.
And it drives them. And what he's saying, and believe me, in sales, manipulation is so prevalent. And what he's really showing is that that's manipulation.
Right.
And what you should be doing is it for the why. And this is where I really started to actually understand the true difference. Now I come from sales, so of course I've been chasing that carrot, the dopamine hit of commission checks all my life. And now I got this guy saying, well, that's not what it is about.
Right.
I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I got to read this. What do you mean that's not what it's about? And what he's really saying is that the salesperson that is doing it not just for the carrot and the commission, he's there to actually help the client or whatever it is for the right reasons.
Sure.
He's there enjoying his day, or she is there to actually help the client or their customer get what they want.
Right. Not
a commission check, not a dopamine hit for a big commission.
Right.
And so for me, that's where it really started to hit home. And for me to actually internalize it and resonate in my head is like, man, this why, okay, I get it now.
Right.
I've got to be in tune with why I'm doing it. More importantly, and a lot of people, well, of course you go to your job to get a check.
Right.
And that's the natural instinct that people are saying, but that's not really why you should be going to work. It should be the reward of going to work. Meaning the paycheck, not the reason.
He calls it inspiration. He said you can either manipulate or inspire behavior. And so sometimes you can get results either way, but one's going to give you much better results for a longer period of time.
It's a longer period of time, because I can tell you, I can go drive someone to a high big check real quick. Dopamine is a real meal deal.
Yeah.
And it does work, but does it have sustainability?
Sure.
And ultimately, at the end of the day, we're all chasing money and all these things to be happy. Well, the one thing I've come to realize is biology taught me that the happy chemical is not dopamine. It's not. And so it's not going to work. I can be hitting as many of those, and I've chased those big, large commission checks so many times, and I've gotten so many of them. And the most disappointing part of it is that you don't get happy. You get dopamine hits and you think you're happy for a moment, but it's the longevity, it's the sustainability that you do not get in the manipulating process. Whereas if you do it for why, you have sustainability. You have something that you can grow on as a person. If your company's doing it, the company's got growth.
Yeah.
It's a significant difference.
Yeah.
And I think your point about the employees is, I think what I got out of it was happy employees lead to happy customers lead to happy shareholders, in that order. And I think so many times you kind of skip one, or, disregard the other, one of them, or, run through employees, and, your customers, go off to another company that had that initial vision you had. And I think that is, a key to making sustainability run in a company. It starts with the employees. You know?
So chapter 3 is where I really believe it makes your point on how all of these books really come together. Chapter 3 and chapter 4 to me were just a lead in right off of Gary Vee, Seth Godin, even Simon on his other books. Mm-hmm. But he really gets into the how, what, and why. And it's this 3 circles that he uses.
The golden circle.
The golden circles, with why being the most important in the middle, and then the how, and then the what. And what he says is the how is specific actions taken to realize your why. And the what do you do? The results or the proof. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, your why is what started it. What is your cause? What do you believe?
Right.
Real basic.
Yeah.
A very simplistic thing to follow, but how amazing the results are of it.
And, I think also what I got too is that, all organizations, or at least the intent of all organizations, is to start with the why, but really only the great ones, keep their why clear.
And follow through with it. Yeah.
Right.
And actually
believe
keep true to it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And believe in it.
Yeah.
Really make it and create it to believe in it, to follow through with.
So do you want to get into, Rex? Was it the Harvard Business Review that wrote that article?
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that?
So if you get into chapter 4, the first thing that I'll say that I love is this is not opinion. This is biology we're discussing here.
Sure.
So the Forbes wrote an article from some sales experts, kind of, with a different angle. And what they were saying is that we miss the who in this. And that when you go to give a sales pitch, that you always want to start with who, because if you don't create authority in your presentation or the author given the presentation.
I think what stood out, and I don't have it in my notes, I just somewhat dubious memory, but I think you said the most powerful part of the brain is the furthest from the brain stem, and the most recently developed part of the brain, which is the emotional part of the brain.
I think what I think that goes back to the Seth Godin book.
Oh, is that Seth Godin?
Yeah, that was just in Linchpin, but it's the same
part of the
biology.
brain.
Okay,
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. And as what he's saying is that we have a new part of the brain, the cerebrium or something like that we didn't used to develop.
The cerebellum.
My pronunciation's way off. I'm not a biologist, obviously. But it's the certain part of the brain that we didn't used to develop.
Right.
And today we have to develop it. It goes back to the lizard brain. Remember, we were talking about the lizard brain is the brain that is the fight or flight. And it's the anger, the frustration, those emotional areas that we can somewhat react upon.
Which is how we make our decisions.
And what he is saying is that you go back to caveman era. That's how you lived.
Right.
Okay. You had to have, those are our survival habits and built into us. And you used to have those to survive. But today life is a little different. And so we're developing the other side of the brain, which is your art and your creative side and your generosity, your love, all of those more character attributes that are more prevalent or need to be more prevalent in today's culture than they used to be.
Right.
But just to make Grayson's point, how these books tie together is incredible.
That's crazy.
It's like they all three sat down, or 4 of them, 5 of them sat down in a room and all wrote it out. Right. You get credit for this, I get, because they cross over so much.
Right.
What about his clarity and discipline when it comes to your why? So if you're working from your why, your clarity, your discipline, your absolute just basic line motivation is so much more natural than it will be if you don't understand your why. Just like I think you're the one that said, get out of bed.
Right.
If you don't really have a why, I'm not hungry, I don't want water, I don't have to work today, I don't want to see anybody. If you have no reason to get out of bed, you probably won't.
Yeah.
You got to know your why. And that's where your clarity, discipline, and consistency is going to come from.
Right. And that goes back to having to be authentic too. That has to be a real authentic part of you. He said clarity must come first, and you have to communicate clearly in order to be understood. And that only comes from saying what you actually believe.
So something that I've caught, and it's not in this book, but it's something that Simon Sinek, I got from one of his TED Talks, and it goes with this. And I think it goes to how sometimes I communicate with you, Sloan, because I'm so comfortable, like a brother with you, that sometimes I don't do what you're supposed to do, and that is sit and listen all the way. Last person to speak is the best leader, meaning that let them get it all the way out and then respond. And that is very, very challenging. Right. But if you know your why, it's so much easier because you already understand what you need to say and respond. You can just sit there and actually be quiet and listen.
Right.
And really, and let them finish. That's a big one that it's not in this book specifically, but it really ties into this chapter.
Yeah. Leaders eat last, right?
And he wrote a book on it. Absolutely. Emergency of Trust. Did you guys read much about that? I loved, and he really, it was chapter 6, and he just really differentiates the difference between what and why. And really getting into, the what is like a commodity, which there was a story told to me, and it really helped me with this. And I was selling a boat to this guy that some people may know, Mark Benioff. And we're negotiating eye to eye. And he looks at me and he says, Rex, you do know that this is like most people buying a pair of jeans. And we were on an over $1 million boat. And he wasn't kidding.
Yeah.
He was dead serious. It was just another commodity to him. It's just a what. There wasn't a most emotional, exciting products I've ever sold in my life is boats. This guy had no emotions. It was a what. Now I do believe that we've got him a little bit more into the why, but it took a while. But it's just funny. He took it as a commodity. There was the negotiations, everything. It was just like him buying a pair of jeans. Incredible. And then, a year later or so, he's very excited about the boat. And definitely you ask him about the boat and he gets excited. And you can see the why just written all over him. But when he bought the boat, there was absolutely no why. He just bought the boat. Like we, and I think he bought a pair of jeans. It was a commodity, and you used the word commodity. Yeah. It was incredible. And I really do believe that Simon Sinek does a great job in chapter 6 of differentiating the difference between what, and it's your however you want to describe what you do and how you do it and all of the above, and the difference of why and the flexibility that comes with why and being inspired by why. is just so much different than doing things for your what or how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that, the part that stood out for me when he took real world examples of Martin Luther King and Steve Jobs, the Wright brothers, 3 totally different times and industries and people, and they all communicated the same way, which is like led with the why, right? Which is really the opposite in, let's call it, the 99% of people who, communicate much less effectively. And I just, I love that, it kind of took me back in time of Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, no internet. How do people know the date? How do you know where to show up? But
Incredible.
Yeah, 250,000 people show up, and it wasn't because of the man. It was because of the why and the movement. There was other
message.
orators at the time.
100%.
There was other, and it was that, and the same sort of example all the way through with the other 2 examples I gave, and I just found that really interesting, and it drove home this point we're talking about. Almost back in the Stone Ages when you consider pre-internet times. How do people show up or know where to go or know what it's all about?
That you couldn't have picked a better example, and I know he talks about it, because when you look at how many people showed up for that I Have a Dream talk, it was unbelievable. And how did everybody find out? It's word of mouth, and that's something that is very, very critical. And he talks about it. We're going to get a little bit more into it. And how does that happen? There's actually a math formula that we can and we're going to talk about in a minute, exactly how he did that. Now, did he know exactly what he was doing? Probably not. Yeah. But hindsight is incredible, and somebody like Simon Sinek goes back and studies it and brings back the data and then is able to show us how did that one of the most amazing days in American history happen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it was an authentic story from A to Z about a why that hit the right demographic. And those are the leaders, the early adopters that went and spread it for them. Mm-hmm. And it took all of those variables for something like that to happen. Mm-hmm. And nothing can start like that without a why. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I have a dream. You couldn't just come up with a better why story than that. And that leads me to my favorite part of the book is the tipping point. What do we call drawing a blank on my mind.
Bell curve?
The bell curve. He walks you right into the bell curve. And this is where we can talk about the I Have a Dream speech and have an understanding, how did that happen? And it started with, obviously, the first one is the why. He was very motivated and driven with the right message. Message is always more important than the
vehicle.
Mm-hmm. So how did he do it? Well, he was obviously had the right message, but what he did, and is if you look at the bell curve, where it's very important, you look at your innovators, which are early on, and they could be the Blu-ray guys, and it doesn't go nowhere. So you got to be careful with the innovators. What you want is the early adopters. You want from the probably 12 to 18% of a beginning stage of your product service. Those are the most important people. And what Martin Luther King Jr. was out there preaching in the churches and preaching in the area of the early adopters of this message. We need better community for the Black community. We need better support, and we need more motivation, and we need more life in our communities. And he was very, very serious about it. But he went out to all of the early churches, to all of the early adopters of this message, and he preached and he preached and he preached more and more of this heartfelt, authentic story out to the early adopters. So what happened on that big day, I Have a Dream speech in Washington, D.C., was all these small churches, all these early adopters out there totally spreading the word and word of mouth. You cannot beat word of mouth advertisement. It's just absolutely the best. And so what happened is he was able to make this whole amazing marketing campaign based upon a why and based on the early adopters of this message. And he sent that out to the early adopters. They went out and told the communities that they lived in. And all of a sudden you had a miracle day.
Yep.
Because he followed all of the right steps.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
it's really that simple.
Yep. And same goes for business too. You know, what's his name? Simon Sinek. He says once you get enough of the 15 to 18%, you know, those early adopters, then the rest will just naturally follow.
Through word of mouth advertising.
Right.
Absolutely. It's a formula, and it's what we base our whole business on.
Right.
We here at Results Media believe in this completely. We believe that you have your why, you have your right campaign, you actually have the right message. It's an authentic story.
Yeah.
It's transparent. It just oozes the why. And we cater all of our marketing targeted specifically. We have so much technology today to help us. We target between the 8 and 18% early adopters only. And then we really push our whole campaigns to be word of mouth,
Right.
Which is just the most effective forms of advertising. And it with a why, an authentic story, you can really change this world. Mm-hmm. You can just do amazing things. Any business owner out there want to change their business can do so easily just following this roadmap.
Right. Mm-hmm. Cool. So I'll just end us with a quote from the book. Simon Sinek says, behind every why type of leader is a how type of leader who brings the why to life.